56% of prehistoric children died before age 15. 75% of adults died from infections. 15% were killed by violence. These aren't war statistics. This was daily life 50,000 years ago. And right now, you just woke up there, naked, empty-handed, alone, in the middle of prehistoric African savanna, where even the strongest humans considered surviving one day a miracle. You have no phone, no clothes, no tools, no one beside you. The only life or death question: can you survive 24 hours? I know what you're thinking. Come on, how hard can it be? I've watched every Bear Grylls episode. I know how to make fire, find water. I even play Minecraft. Hold up. Everything you've seen in movies, survival shows, or even your own imagination. It's all a romantic fantasy about prehistoric times. You're thinking, I'll find a cave, grab some sticks, rub them together for fire, catch some fish, pick some berries, easy. Reality? Scientists studied 17 different hunter-gatherer tribes. Result: 56% of children didn't live to puberty. 75% of deaths from infection, 15% from violence. This wasn't warfare, this was everyday life. 50,000 years ago, let me tell you about Tom, a 32-year-old software engineer from Silicon Valley. IQ of 140, climbed Mount Everest, worked out regularly. In 2019, Tom got lost for 3 days in Oregon forests. He had GPS, drinking water, survival knowledge from the internet. But guess what? Tom nearly died from hypothermia in just 18 hours. That was the 21st century with technology and gear. And you, naked, empty-handed in a prehistoric world? A survival expert with 15 years of experience once said, "It took me 4 full days to make fire using the bow drill method, 4 days with bloody hands and my spirit nearly broken." That was someone experienced under favorable conditions. You'd have to learn fire making while your flesh trembles from cold, your stomach cramps from hunger, and your brain shuts down from stress. Because this isn't really about physical strength or intelligence. This is a race between your ability to learn and the speed of death. And I'm sorry to tell you, death will win. Not because you're weak, but because the world 50,000 years ago was too brutal. To understand why, let's start with the first hour. The first hour when you'll realize one simple but terrifying truth. You're not the hunter, you're the prey. And in those first 60 minutes, you'll face the same enemies our ancestors confronted daily, enemies that could swallow a human head in one bite. Your eyes flutter open. The African sun is rising, painting the savanna in shades of gold and red. For a split second, it's almost beautiful, almost peaceful. Then reality hits. You're completely exposed, no shelter, no protection, and you have absolutely no idea what's watching you right now. Here's what you need to understand. In your modern life, you wake up thinking about coffee, emails, maybe traffic. Your ancestors, they woke up thinking about one thing only. Am I about to die? You don't have the luxury of looking for food or water right now. Those can wait, because in the first hour of your prehistoric nightmare, there's only one priority that matters. Don't become something else's breakfast. Let me paint you a picture of what's out there. Hunting. 50,000 years ago, Africa was home to creatures that would make today's lions look like house cats. The giant, short-faced hyena, Pachycracuda brevirostris, stood 4 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed over 400 pounds. Their jaws were so powerful they could crack open elephant bones like we crack walnuts. But here's the truly terrifying part. They could fit an entire human head in their mouth. One bite, game over. These weren't scavengers waiting for leftovers. These were active predators that hunted in packs, and humans were absolutely on the menu. Paleontologists have found human bones with hyena bite marks from this exact time period. Our ancestors didn't just fear these creatures, they were regularly eaten by them, and that's just one predator. You're also sharing this landscape with saber-toothed cats, cave lions, leopards, and massive bears that make grizzlies look like teddy bears. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and really depressing for you. Your prehistoric ancestors had something you don't: instant threat recognition. Dr. Richard Wrangham from Harvard explains it perfectly. Modern humans have lost the instinctual ability to immediately identify and respond to mortal danger. We've been removed from natural selection pressures for so long that our survival instincts have essentially atrophied. Think about it. When was the last time you had to scan your environment for predators? When did you last need to identify whether that sound in the bushes meant death was approaching? Your ancestors could tell from a single broken twig, a shifted shadow, or an unusual bird call whether danger was near. They could identify predator scat from 50 yards away and know exactly which animal left it and how recently. You'd probably mistake a leopard's warning growl for your stomach rumbling. Dr. Melvin Connor, an anthropologist at Emory University, puts it bluntly. The modern human mind is catastrophically unprepared for actual survival situations. We've traded our predator awareness systems for abstract thinking skills, great for building rockets, terrible for not getting eaten. Here's a real example that'll blow your mind. In 2018, researchers tested modern city dwellers versus members of the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, one of the last true hunter-gatherer societies. They played recordings of various animal sounds and asked people to identify threats. The results? Hadza members correctly identified dangerous animals 97% of the time. City dwellers, 18%. 18%. You had better odds flipping a coin. But let's say somehow, you managed to spot danger approaching. What then? Your ancestor would already be moving, no hesitation, no debate. Survival mode activated. You'd stand there like a deer in headlights, your modern brain trying to process and analyze and rationalize what you're seeing. Is that really a predator? Maybe it's just passing through. Should I run? Which direction? Let me think about this logically. Congratulations, you just spent your last 30 seconds on Earth having an internal committee meeting. Dr. Sarah Blaffer-Hurdy from UC Davis explains this perfectly. Prehistoric humans didn't have the luxury of overthinking. Hesitation meant death. Their brains were wired for instant action, not contemplation. And here's the kicker. Even if your brain somehow kicks into gear and tells you to run, your body probably won't cooperate the way you expect. You know the fight or flight response everyone talks about? In genuine life or death situations, there's actually a third option your body might choose. Freeze. Complete total paralysis while your brain tries to process the impossible situation you're in. Military psychologists call it the deer in headlights syndrome, and it affects roughly 30% of people in their first life-threatening encounter. So there's a 1 in 3 chance that when that giant hyena charges toward you, you'll just stand there, watching, waiting for death. Your prehistoric ancestors had been selected over millions of years for exactly the opposite reaction. When they saw danger, they moved, period. But let's be optimistic. Let's say you somehow spot the predator, your brain engages, and your legs start working. You start running. Where exactly are you running to? Your ancestors knew this landscape like you know your neighborhood. Every tree, every rock formation, every potential shelter or escape route was mapped in their minds. They knew which trees were climbable, which rocks provided good hiding spots, which areas predators avoided. You're running blind through completely alien terrain, probably straight into the territory of something even more dangerous. And even if you pick the right direction, here's another fun fact. You're probably not going to outrun whatever's chasing you. That short-faced hyena can hit speeds of 35 miles per hour. You, on your best day, maybe 15. Simple math, you lose. Dr. Christopher Ruff from Johns Hopkins University studied the bone density and muscle attachment points of prehistoric humans versus modern humans. His conclusion: our ancestors were approximately 40% stronger than modern humans, with bone density that suggests they could endure physical stresses that would cripple us. They weren't just mentally tougher, they were physically built for this world in ways we simply aren't. So let's review your first hour situation. You can't identify threats as well as your ancestors. You can't react as quickly. You can't run as fast. You don't know the terrain, and you're facing predators that regularly ate humans for breakfast. Starting to see the problem? But here's what's really going to blow your mind. We haven't even talked about the invisible killers yet, the microscopic threats that were actually far more dangerous than any predator, the pathogens and parasites that turned a simple scratch into a death sentence. And that's assuming you survive the next 7 hours to even worry about infection, because right now, as the sun climbs higher and the African heat begins to build, you're facing an entirely different kind of death, one that's patient, relentless, and absolutely guaranteed to kill you if you don't figure out shelter. The scorching sun that's about to turn your naked skin into leather, and the brutal cold that's coming tonight to freeze whatever's left of you. Maybe you got lucky and the predators were busy with easier prey. Maybe you found a temporary hiding spot. Either way, don't celebrate yet, because now you're facing something far more patient and far more deadly than any predator: exposure. The African sun is climbing higher, and you're about to discover why your ancestors considered shelter their absolute first priority, even before food, even before water, because exposure doesn't just threaten to kill you, it guarantees it. During the day, temperatures in prehistoric Africa could reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit. At night, they could drop to near freezing. Your naked, unprotected body is about to experience both extremes, and neither one cares how smart you think you are. But here's the thing that's really going to mess with your head. Building adequate shelter isn't just about finding materials and putting them together. It's about reinventing architecture from scratch while your body is actively dying. Let me explain what I mean. Your ancestors didn't just throw together random sticks and leaves and hope for the best. They were master engineers who had perfected shelter building techniques over hundreds of thousands of years. And even with all that inherited knowledge, shelter construction was still a life or death race against time. Dr. John Shea from Stony Brook University puts it perfectly. Prehistoric shelter construction required an intimate understanding of materials, science, structural engineering, and environmental physics. These people were essentially practicing advanced engineering without any formal education. So what did they build? In rocky areas, they used natural cave formations, but not just any caves. They selected caves with specific orientations to maximize warmth retention and minimize wind exposure. They understood thermal dynamics in ways that would make modern engineers jealous. When caves weren't available, they built sophisticated lean-tos against rock faces. But these weren't simple stick constructions. Archaeological evidence shows they used complex interlocking branch systems that could support significant weight and withstand high winds. In some areas, they even used mammoth bones as structural frameworks. Picture this: massive mammoth ribs arranged in dome formations covered with carefully layered hides and sealed with mud and vegetation. These structures could house entire families and maintain internal temperatures even in sub-zero conditions. The level of engineering sophistication is mind-blowing. Dr. Olga Soffer from the University of Illinois studied mammoth bone dwellings in Eastern Europe. Her findings? These structures demonstrate understanding of load distribution, thermal insulation, and architectural principles that rival modern construction techniques. And that's just the framework. The covering systems were equally sophisticated. Let me tell you about Ötzi, the famous ice mummy discovered in the Alps. This guy lived about 5,300 years ago, much more recent than our 50,000-year scenario, and yet his clothing system was so advanced that modern survival experts struggle to replicate it. Ötzi wore a coat made of sheepskin and goatskin, sewn together with sinew in specific patterns that provided maximum flexibility and insulation. His leggings were crafted from goat leather with a complex stitching system that prevented tearing. His shoes were made from bearskin soles, deer hide uppers, and grass padding with a tree bark net designed to provide traction on ice. The sophistication is staggering. His clothing represented hundreds of hours of skilled labor using techniques passed down through generations. Each piece was precisely engineered for specific environmental conditions. And here's the kicker. Ötzi had access to metal tools, domesticated animals, and thousands of years of technological advancement beyond your 50,000-year scenario. He was practically living in the space age compared to what you're dealing with. You're standing naked in prehistoric Africa trying to reinvent textile engineering from scratch using nothing but rocks and sticks. Dr. Elizabeth Wayland Barber from Occidental College, an expert in prehistoric textiles, explains the problem. Creating functional clothing from raw animal hides requires tanning, cutting, and sewing techniques that take years to master. Without these skills, animal skins will simply rot or become rigid leather that provides no insulation. So let's be realistic about your shelter situation. You can't make clothing. You don't understand structural engineering. You have no tools, and you're working against a ticking clock. The temperature is rising. By midday, you'll be dealing with heat that can literally cook your exposed skin. By tonight, you'll face cold that can kill you through hypothermia in just a few hours. Meanwhile, you're trying to become an instant expert in material selection, structural engineering, thermal dynamics, weatherproofing, site selection, all while your brain is compromised by stress and dehydration and probably the early stages of heat exhaustion. Here's what's really going to happen when you try to build shelter. First, you'll waste precious hours trying to move materials that are too heavy. Your ancestors were about 40% stronger than you, remember? That branch they could easily drag? You'll struggle just to lift it. Second, you'll choose the wrong location. Your ancestors knew to avoid low-lying areas where cold air settles, to position openings away from prevailing winds, to select sites with natural drainage. You'll probably build in the first spot that looks convenient, which will turn into a wind tunnel or flood zone. Third, your construction will collapse repeatedly. Building a stable structure requires understanding load distribution, joint reinforcement, and material properties. You'll learn these lessons the hard way, probably after your shelter falls on you. Fourth, even if you somehow manage to build something that stays upright, it won't provide adequate protection. Effective insulation requires creating dead air spaces, understanding heat transfer principles, and using materials in specific configurations. Your improvised shelter will be essentially useless against temperature extremes. Dr. Lawrence Guy Strauss from the University of New Mexico studied prehistoric shelter remains across Europe and Africa. His conclusion? Even the simplest effective shelters required sophisticated understanding of physics and engineering principles that modern people typically don't possess. But let's say you somehow managed to throw together some basic protection from the elements. Congratulations, you've just solved about 10% of your problem. Because here's what you haven't thought about: maintenance. Your ancestors understood that shelter wasn't a one-time construction project. It was an ongoing engineering challenge that required constant attention. Wind damage, moisture penetration, structural settling, material degradation. These are daily problems that require daily solutions. You know what happens when your improvised shelter starts failing in the middle of a freezing night? You die. Simple as that. And we haven't even talked about the energy cost of all this construction. Every calorie you burn building shelter is a calorie you can't use for other survival activities. Your ancestors had optimized shelter building techniques that minimize energy expenditure while maximizing protection. They could build effective shelter quickly and efficiently. You'll exhaust yourself building inadequate protection, leaving you even more vulnerable to everything else trying to kill you. But here's the truly brutal part. Even if you somehow master shelter construction, you're still missing the most critical component of prehistoric survival: fire, because shelter without fire is just a slow way to die instead of a fast one. And creating fire from nothing, that's about to become your next impossible challenge. Let me start with a simple fact that will destroy any remaining hope you might have. Without fire, you will die. Not might die, will die. Guaranteed. Here's why fire isn't optional in your Stone Age nightmare. Fire purifies water so bacteria doesn't kill you from the inside. Fire cooks meat so parasites don't eat you alive. Fire provides warmth so hypothermia doesn't shut down your organs. Fire creates light so predators can't ambush you in darkness. And fire scares away most of the creatures that want to eat you. Your ancestors knew this. Fire was so central to human survival that we literally evolved around it. Without fire, you're not human. You're just another piece of meat wandering around waiting to die. And here's your problem. Nobody taught you how to make it. I know what you're thinking. How hard can it be? I'll just rub two sticks together like in the movies. Stop right there. That attitude will kill you faster than a saber-toothed cat. Creating fire from friction is one of the most difficult skills humans ever developed. It requires perfect materials, flawless technique, ideal conditions, and hundreds of hours of practice. Even experienced survival experts fail repeatedly. Let me walk you through what actually needs to happen for friction fire, specifically the bow drill method, which is your best shot at success. First, you need the right wood, not just any wood, specific species with exact moisture content and density ratios. Your fireboard must be soft wood that creates fine dust when drilled. Cedar, willow, cottonwood, woods you probably can't identify in prehistoric Africa. Your spindle needs to be slightly harder wood, perfectly straight, exactly the right diameter. Too thick and it won't spin properly. Too thin and it breaks under pressure. How are you supposed to know any of this? Your ancestors learned wood identification over lifetimes. They could tell tree species by bark texture, leaf shape, even the sound wood makes when struck. You can barely tell oak from maple in your own backyard. Dr. John McPherson, one of the world's leading primitive fire experts, puts it bluntly: wood selection alone requires botanical knowledge that takes years to develop. Most people fail at friction fire before they even start drilling because they chose the wrong materials. But let's say you somehow pick the right wood. Now you need tools. You don't have to shape it correctly. Your fireboard needs a precisely carved notch, not too deep, not too shallow, angled exactly right to capture the hot dust. Your spindle must be perfectly round and smooth. Your bow needs to be the right length with proper tension. Your tinder bundle requires specific construction that allows airflow while catching the ember. You need to carve all this using nothing but rocks. Sharp rocks you also don't know how to make properly. Oh, and you need cordage for your bow. That means identifying plant fibers, processing them correctly, and twisting them into rope strong enough to handle the drilling motion, another skill that takes weeks to learn properly. Dr. Larry Dean Olson spent decades teaching primitive survival. His assessment: I've watched engineers with PhDs struggle for weeks to master friction fire. It's not about intelligence, it's about muscle memory and understanding that only comes from extensive practice. The statistics are brutal. Studies show that even experienced outdoorsmen fail at friction fire 80 to 90% of the time during their first attempts. These are people who camp regularly, who consider themselves outdoorsy. 9 out of 10 failures. And that's with modern tools to prepare materials, unlimited practice time, and no life-threatening pressure. Now let's talk about the actual technique. Assuming you somehow built a perfect fire kit, the bow drill motion isn't spinning really fast. You need consistent pressure while varying speed. Too much pressure and the spindle binds. Too little and you don't generate enough friction. Too fast and you blow out your ember. Too slow and you don't build enough heat. Your left hand holds the socket, pressing down on the spindle, but it's not just holding. You need exact pressure while keeping everything perfectly aligned. Your right hand operates the bow with long, smooth strokes, maintaining steady rhythm without stopping. Meanwhile, you're crouched in an awkward position that destroys your back and legs. Your muscles scream, sweat drips into your eyes, and you must maintain this position for potentially hours while executing perfect technique. Because here's what survival shows don't tell you. Friction fire takes time, lots of time. Professional instructors with decades of experience need 20 to 30 minutes of continuous drilling to create an ember under perfect conditions with ideal materials on calm days when they're well rested and well fed. You'll attempt this while exhausted, stressed, possibly hypothermic, with improvised materials in windy conditions while watching for predators. Let me tell you about a real case that will crush your confidence. Les Stroud, survivorman, one of the most experienced survival experts on Earth, once spent an entire day trying to make friction fire for his show. An entire day. This is a man with military training, decades of wilderness experience, and perfect materials provided by his crew. He failed repeatedly for 8 hours straight. Think about that. If Les Stroud can fail for 8 hours with professional support, what are your chances naked in prehistoric Africa with improvised materials and giant hyenas stalking you? But wait, it gets worse. Even if you somehow create an ember, you're only 20% done. That ember is tiny, fragile, barely glowing red. It will die if exposed to too much wind, too little oxygen, or moisture from your breath. You must gently transfer it to a perfectly constructed tinder bundle, then blow on it with exact pressure and rhythm to nurse it into flame. Too gentle, and it dies. Too aggressive, and you blow it apart. Studies show that even people who successfully create embers fail to turn them into fire 60% of the time. They get excited about finally making an ember and rush the final steps, killing it instantly. Now let's talk about the archaeological evidence that shows just how impossible your situation really is. At Kubifora in Kenya, researchers found evidence of controlled fire use dating back 1.5 million years. That's not 50,000 years ago. That's over a million years before your scenario. Humans have been using fire for over a million years. This technology is older than modern human anatomy. It's so fundamental to our survival that we literally evolved around it. Dr. Richard Wrangham from Harvard argues that cooking with fire drove human brain evolution. Our ancestors became so dependent on cooked food that our digestive systems evolved to require it for optimal nutrition. Without fire, you're missing a fundamental requirement for human physiology. At Qesem Cave in Israel, archaeologists found hearths used continuously for hundreds of thousands of years, layer upon layer of ash, showing generation after generation maintaining fire in the same locations. This wasn't occasional fire use. This was fire as the absolute center of human existence. And here's what should terrify you. Even our closest relatives couldn't master fire consistently. Neanderthals had bigger brains than modern humans, lived in ice age conditions, and survived for hundreds of thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests they could maintain fires and transport them, but they may never have learned to create fire from scratch reliably. These people were stronger than you, better adapted to harsh environments, and had hundreds of thousands of years to perfect fire making. Yet, fire creation remained beyond their consistent abilities. What makes you think you do better? But remember, you're not attempting this under ideal conditions. You're not in a comfortable classroom with an instructor and unlimited materials. You're in prehistoric Africa. The sun is climbing higher, making you sweat, which makes gripping the bow drill nearly impossible. Your wood is either too dry from heat and crumbles or slightly damp from morning dew and won't generate proper friction. You're being stalked by predators, forcing you to stop every few minutes to scan for threats. This breaks your rhythm, lets materials cool down, and forces you to restart constantly. You're exhausted from shelter building and running from danger. Your hands are cut up from handling rough materials without tools. Stress hormones flood your system, compromising fine motor control. And you're racing against time. Every hour you spend failing to make fire brings you closer to nightfall, when temperatures drop and your chances of success approach zero. Dr. Cody London, one of the world's most experienced survival instructors, trained with Native American firekeepers who learned traditional techniques from childhood. His brutal assessment: even with master-level instruction, most modern people need weeks of dedicated practice before they can create friction fire reliably. In real survival situations with stress and compromised conditions, that timeline extends to months or years. Months or years. You have hours. Here's your final reality check. Remember that survival expert who took 4 days to create fire with a bow drill. That was under perfect conditions, good weather, unlimited materials, no predators, no time pressure, with years of previous experience. You're attempting the same task while naked, stressed, exhausted, with improvised materials, under constant threat, racing against hypothermia. Your actual chances of success? Effectively zero. But let's be wildly optimistic. Let's say you somehow beat impossible odds and create fire. Congratulations, you've solved one piece of the survival puzzle. Now you face an even deadlier challenge: food. And this isn't about finding enough calories to survive. This is about playing Russian roulette with every single thing you put in your mouth. Because in the prehistoric world, half the plants around you are actively trying to kill you. And the animals, they're not just hard to catch. They're loaded with parasites and diseases that will destroy you from the inside out. Welcome to the deadly guessing game where every meal could be your last. Okay, let's say you've somehow achieved the impossible. You've avoided predators, built shelter, and created fire. Now you're facing the next challenge: finding food without killing yourself in the process. And here's where Hollywood has poisoned your brain with the most dangerous lies of all. Movies show hunting like this. Our rugged hero grabs a spear, stalks through the wilderness for an hour, kills a mammoth with one perfectly placed throw, then roasts mammoth steaks over a crackling fire while admiring the sunset. Reality? Hunting in the Stone Age was a complex military operation requiring years of training, intimate knowledge of animal behavior, sophisticated weapons technology, and coordinated teamwork. It was chess, not checkers, and even the experts failed most of the time. Let me tell you about one of the most sophisticated hunting operations ever discovered. At Marne in southern France, archaeologists found evidence of an incredible prehistoric hunting strategy from 300,000 years ago. Our ancestors didn't just chase random animals and hope for the best. They engineered an elaborate trap using the landscape itself. They identified a natural bottleneck, a narrow valley between steep cliffs. Then they used fire to drive entire herds of wild horses toward this kill zone. But this wasn't just light some fires and hope. They set coordinated burn lines across miles of territory, timing everything perfectly to funnel hundreds of animals into the trap. Teams of hunters positioned themselves at strategic points. They had backup plans for when animals tried to escape. They understood wind patterns, animal psychology, and group dynamics. The level of planning and coordination was staggering. Dr. Mary Hélène Moncel from the National Museum of Natural History studied these sites extensively. Her conclusion: these hunting operations required military-level planning and execution. Multiple teams had to coordinate across vast distances with perfect timing. One mistake and the entire operation failed. And this was 300,000 years ago. Your 50,000-year scenario? Your ancestors were even more sophisticated. But here's what will crush your hunting dreams. You have none of the knowledge, tools, or physical capabilities required for successful hunting. First, let's talk about weapons. You can't just pick up a stick and call it a spear. Effective hunting weapons require advanced engineering and material science. A proper spear point needs to be knapped from specific types of stone, obsidian, flint, or chert, shaped with techniques that take years to master. The hafting system that attaches the point to the shaft requires understanding of physics, chemistry, and materials engineering. Your ancestors used complex adhesives made from tree resins, sinew wrapping systems, and binding techniques that ensured the weapon wouldn't fail during the critical moment. Dr. John Shea from Stony Brook University is one of the world's leading experts on prehistoric weapons technology. His research shows that even simple spear points required sophisticated understanding of fracture mechanics, edge geometry, and impact dynamics. People think Stone Age weapons were crude, Dr. Shea explains. In reality, they represent some of the most sophisticated engineering achievements in human history. A properly made stone spear point can penetrate elephant hide and bone, but creating one requires knowledge that takes decades to develop. You don't have decades, you have hours. And even if you somehow made a perfect weapon, you still need to know how to use it. Throwing a spear accurately requires thousands of hours of practice. Your ancestors started training as children and practiced daily their entire lives. Studies of modern traditional hunters show that even experienced spear throwers miss their target 70 to 80% of the time under ideal conditions. That's people who've been training since childhood, hunting animals they know intimately in familiar territory. You You'd be lucky to hit the ground on purpose. But let's say you somehow master weapon making and achieve Olympic-level throwing accuracy overnight. You still need to find animals to hunt. Your ancestors were master trackers who could identify individual animals from their footprints, determine their age and health from their droppings, and predict their behavior based on environmental conditions. They understood migration patterns, feeding habits, social structures, and seasonal behaviors of dozens of different species. Dr. Louis Liebenberg studied the tracking abilities of Kalahari Bushmen, some of the world's last traditional hunter-gatherers. He found that master trackers could follow individual animal tracks across rock surfaces, through water, and across terrain where no visible signs existed to modern eyes. Traditional tracking represents one of humanity's most sophisticated cognitive achievements. Dr. Liebenberg explains, master trackers are essentially reading a complex, three-dimensional text written in the landscape, interpreting layers of information invisible to untrained observers. You can barely track your own car in a parking lot. And even if you somehow develop supernatural tracking abilities, you still need to understand animal behavior well enough to predict where your prey will be and how it will react to your presence. African wildlife has been dealing with human hunters for millions of years. These animals have evolved sophisticated anti-predator strategies specifically designed to avoid humans. They can detect human scent from miles away, recognize human tracking patterns, and modify their behavior to avoid predictable hunting routes. You know what you smell like to every animal within miles? Stress, fear, and inexperience. You're broadcasting easy target with every step. But hunting is actually the easy part compared to gathering plant foods. Because while a failed hunt just means you go hungry, a gathering mistake means you die horribly from poisoning. Your ancestors needed to identify and safely process hundreds of different plant species. They knew which parts of each plant were edible, when to harvest them, how to prepare them, and which ones required complex processing to remove toxins. Let me tell you about the jaquirity bean, Abrus precatorius. This little seed looks almost exactly like a red and black peanut. Cute, right? Harmless looking. One seed contains enough aberrant toxin to kill an adult human. There's no antidote. You eat one jaquirity bean and you're dead within days from internal hemorrhaging. And here's the terrifying part. Jaquirity beans grow wild across tropical Africa. They're common, they look like food, and they're absolutely lethal. Dr. Amy Stewart, author of Wicked Plants, documents hundreds of plant species that can kill humans. Many of them look delicious, smell appealing, and grow abundantly in exactly the environments where you'd be trying to survive. The plant kingdom is full of chemical warfare. Dr. Stewart explains, plants can't run from threats, so they evolved sophisticated toxin systems instead. Many of these compounds specifically target mammalian nervous systems, digestive systems, and cardiovascular systems. Your ancestors learned to navigate this botanical minefield through generations of accumulated knowledge passed down through oral traditions. They knew which mushrooms were safe and which would destroy your liver. They understood that cassava roots require extensive processing to remove deadly cyanide compounds. They could identify the subtle differences between edible and poisonous berries that look nearly identical. You'd be playing Russian roulette with every green thing you touched. But it gets worse. Even plants that are technically edible can kill you if you don't know how to process them correctly. Take acorns, for example. Acorns are a major food source for many traditional societies, but raw acorns contain tannins that will destroy your kidneys and liver. Making acorns safe to eat requires an elaborate process of grinding, leaching, and multiple water changes that can take days to complete properly. Miss any step in the process, don't leach them long enough, use the wrong type of water, and you've just poisoned yourself. Dr. Kat Anderson from UC Berkeley studied traditional plant processing techniques among California Native Americans. Her research revealed incredibly sophisticated food preparation systems that took years to master. Traditional plant processing represents advanced chemistry and nutrition science, Dr. Anderson explains. People knew exactly how to neutralize plant toxins, maximize nutritional content, and preserve foods for long-term storage. This knowledge took generations to develop and required constant practice to maintain. And here's what makes your situation even more hopeless. Seasonal timing. Many wild plants are only edible during specific times of year. Harvest them too early and they're toxic. Wait too long and they're either gone or have developed defensive compounds that will make you sick. Your ancestors tracked complex seasonal calendars in their heads, knowing precisely when each plant species would be at peak edibility and safety. They understood that the same plant could be nutritious in spring and deadly in fall. You don't even know what season it is, let alone the subtle timing of plant maturation cycles. But let's say you somehow develop master-level botanical knowledge overnight and successfully identify edible plants. You still need to gather enough calories to sustain yourself, which brings us to the next crushing reality. Most wild plant foods are incredibly low in calories and nutrients compared to what you're used to. Modern humans need approximately 2,000 calories per day to maintain basic bodily functions. Wild plant foods typically provide 10 to 50 calories per serving after accounting for the energy cost of gathering and processing them. Do the math. You'd need to successfully identify, gather, and process dozens of different plant species every single day just to avoid starvation. And that's assuming you never make a mistake that poisons you. Dr. Richard Lee studied the foraging patterns of traditional hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari Desert. He found that experienced foragers spent 6 to 8 hours per day gathering plant foods, and this was in an environment they knew intimately after lifetimes of experience. You'd be starting from zero knowledge in an unfamiliar environment while simultaneously trying to avoid predators, maintain fire, and repair shelter. The energy mathematics simply don't work in your favor. Here's another brutal reality. Even if you somehow identify safe, edible plants, you need tools to process them effectively. Many wild foods require grinding, pounding, or crushing to make them digestible or to remove toxins. Your ancestors had sophisticated toolkits made from carefully selected stones, shaped bones, and wooden implements. They knew which rocks made the best grinding surfaces, how to shape mortars and pestles, and how to maintain their tools for maximum efficiency. You're trying to process food with random rocks you pick up off the ground. And then there's water. You need water to process many plant foods, to cook meat safely, and just to stay alive. But finding clean, safe water in the prehistoric world was another deadly guessing game. Standing water could be contaminated with parasites, bacteria, or toxic algae. Running water might look clean but carry deadly pathogens from upstream. Even rainwater could be contaminated if it ran over toxic plants or animal droppings. Your ancestors knew which water sources were safe, how to identify contamination, and techniques for purifying questionable water. They understood that water from certain locations was safer during specific seasons, and they knew how to read environmental signs that indicated water quality. You'd be drinking Russian roulette with every sip. But here's what makes the food situation truly hopeless. Even if you somehow master plant identification, animal tracking, weapon making, and food processing, you're still missing the most crucial element of prehistoric survival: knowledge of what's actually worth the energy to pursue. Your ancestors had developed incredibly sophisticated cost-benefit analysis for every food source. They knew exactly how many calories they'd expend hunting a particular animal versus the calories they'd gain if successful, and they understood which plants provided the best nutritional return for the time invested in gathering and processing them. This wasn't just intuition, it was precise mathematical calculation developed over thousands of generations of trial and error. Dr. Kim Hill from Arizona State University studied the foraging decisions of 8 hunter-gatherers in Paraguay. He found that experienced foragers could instantly calculate complex energy equations involving search time, handling time, nutritional content, and success probability for hundreds of different food sources. Traditional foraging represents one of the most sophisticated optimization problems humans have ever solved, Dr. Hill explains. Every decision involves complex calculations that would challenge modern computers, but experienced foragers solve them intuitively in seconds. You can barely calculate the tip at a restaurant. And here's the final nail in your coffin. Even if you somehow master all these skills overnight, you still can't escape the invisible killers that turned every meal into a potential death sentence: parasites, bacteria, viruses, prions. The prehistoric world was crawling with microscopic assassins that could destroy you from the inside out, and many of them traveled through the food chain. Raw meat could be loaded with trichinosis, toxoplasmosis, or dozens of other parasites that would slowly eat you alive from within. Plant foods could carry botulism spores, E. coli, or fungal toxins that would shut down your organs one by one. And here's what's truly terrifying. Many of these microscopic killers are patient. They won't kill you immediately. They'll wait weeks or months, slowly weakening your immune system, destroying your organs, and compromising your ability to survive other threats. By the time you realize you're sick, it's already too late. Your ancestors developed elaborate food safety protocols to minimize these risks. They knew which foods were safe to eat raw, which required cooking, and which needed special preparation to eliminate pathogens. They understood seasonal patterns of contamination and had techniques for identifying spoiled or dangerous food. You'd be eating blind with no understanding of the microscopic war being waged inside every bite. So let's review your food situation. You can't hunt effectively. You can't identify safe plants. You can't process foods properly. You can't find clean water. You can't calculate energy costs versus benefits. And you can't protect yourself from foodborne pathogens. Every meal is a gamble with death as the stakes. But amazingly, food isn't even your biggest problem, because there are threats stalking you that are far more patient, far more numerous, and far more deadly than starvation. Threats so small you can't see them, so persistent they're everywhere, and so ruthless they'll use your own body against you in ways that will make death seem like mercy. The invisible war is about to begin, and you're about to discover why our ancestors feared disease more than any predator that ever lived. Welcome to the invisible war, where your deadliest enemies are too small to see but numerous enough to be everywhere, patient enough to wait months before killing you, and ruthless enough to turn your own body into a weapon against itself. Forget the giant hyenas and saber-toothed cats. Your biggest threat in the prehistoric world isn't something with claws or fangs. It's something so tiny that billions of them could fit on the head of a pin, yet so deadly that they've killed more humans throughout history than every predator, war, and natural disaster combined. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, the microscopic assassins that turned a simple scratch into a death sentence and made every drop of water a potential killer. And here's what's going to terrify you. Your modern immune system is catastrophically unprepared for the microscopic warfare of the Stone Age. Let me start with some archaeological evidence that will crush any remaining optimism you might have about your survival chances. At the Cima de los Huesos site in Spain, researchers found 400,000-year-old skulls showing clear evidence of chronic infections, bone lesions indicating tuberculosis, abscesses from dental infections that spread through the entire skull, and signs of parasitic diseases that slowly consumed victims from within. Dr. Ana Gracia Tellez, who led the study, puts it bluntly, these weren't isolated cases. Infection was the leading cause of death in prehistoric populations. Every skeleton we examine shows evidence of multiple infectious diseases. At Kafsa Cave in Israel, archaeologists found 90,000-year-old remains with bone changes consistent with malaria, typhoid, and multiple parasitic infections. In Morocco, researchers discovered evidence of plague-like diseases dating back over 100,000 years. The pattern is consistent across every prehistoric site ever excavated. Our ancestors were under constant assault from microscopic killers. But here's what makes your situation even more hopeless than theirs. They had immune systems specifically evolved for this microbial battlefield. You don't. Dr. Sharon Molam, an evolutionary biologist at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, explains the problem. Modern humans have what we call pampered immune systems. We've lived in sanitized environments for so many generations that our immune responses have become calibrated for the relatively sterile modern world. Think about it. When was the last time your immune system had to fight off cholera, typhoid, bubonic plague, dysentery, malaria? These diseases shaped human evolution for millions of years, but your immune system has never encountered them. Your ancestors' immune systems were like battle-hardened soldiers who'd been fighting the same enemies for generations. Your immune system is like a civilian who's never seen combat suddenly thrown into the most brutal war zone imaginable. Let me walk you through exactly how this plays out in your Stone Age nightmare. First, let's talk about that innocent little cut on your hand from handling rough stone tools. In the modern world, you'd wash it, maybe put on a Band-Aid. and forget about it. In the prehistoric world, that cut is a highway for bacteria to enter your bloodstream. Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pyogenes, Clostridium tetani, these bacteria are everywhere in the natural environment, just waiting for an opportunity to invade. Without antiseptics, antibiotics, or even basic understanding of germ theory, that tiny cut becomes an infected wound within hours. Dr. Brad Spellberg from UCLA Medical Center studies antibiotic-resistant infections. His research on pre-antibiotic mortality rates is sobering. Before modern medicine, approximately 30% of people who developed serious skin infections died. Not got sick, died. A simple cut could kill you within days through sepsis. Your wound becomes red, swollen, and hot to the touch. Red streaks start traveling up your arm. That's lymphangitis, meaning the infection is spreading through your lymphatic system. Your body temperature spikes as your immune system goes into overdrive trying to fight an enemy it's never properly encountered. Within 48 hours, you're in septic shock, your blood pressure plummets, your organs start shutting down, and you slip into a coma. Game over. And that's just from a small cut. Now let's talk about what happens when you drink contaminated water. That crystal clear stream looks so pure, so refreshing. You're desperately thirsty, and your ancestors drank from streams like this all the time, right? Wrong. Your ancestors knew which water sources were safe and which were death traps. They understood seasonal contamination patterns, could identify signs of upstream contamination, and had techniques for purifying questionable water. You're about to play microbial roulette with your life. Dr. Rebecca Lansfield from the World Health Organization studies waterborne diseases in developing countries. Her findings paint a terrifying picture. Untreated water sources in tropical environments can contain dozens of different pathogens simultaneously, the bacteria, viruses, parasites, and toxic algae, all competing to see which one kills you first. Let's say you swallow water contaminated with Giardia lamblia, a microscopic parasite that's incredibly common in natural water sources. And the symptoms start about a week later. Explosive diarrhea, violent abdominal cramps, projectile vomiting. You're losing fluids faster than you can replace them, becoming dangerously dehydrated while simultaneously unable to keep any water down. But Giardia is actually one of the mild ones. You could just as easily contract Entamoeba histolytica, which literally eats holes in your intestinal wall, causing massive internal bleeding, or Cyclospora cayetanensis, which causes months of debilitating diarrhea that can kill through dehydration and malnutrition. Dr. David Sack from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health puts it in perspective. In areas without access to clean water and medical care, waterborne diseases kill approximately 1.8 million people annually. That's more than 5,000 deaths per day, mostly from dehydration and organ failure. And we haven't even talked about the really horrifying parasites yet. Picture this. You eat some undercooked meat because you couldn't get your fire hot enough or maintain consistent cooking temperature. Unknown to you, that meat contained cysts of Taenia solium, pork tapeworm. The larvae hatch in your intestines and begin their journey through your bloodstream. Some settle in your muscles, forming painful cysts that make movement agony. Others travel to your brain, where they form cysts that cause seizures, personality changes, and eventual death. This condition is called neurocystic urcosis, and it's still a major killer in areas without modern medical care. Dr. Hector Garcia from Universidad Peruana Cayetano Heredia is one of the world's leading experts on this disease. Neurocystic urcosis is probably the most common parasitic infection of the central nervous system worldwide, Dr. Garcia explains. Without treatment, brain cysts continue growing until they cause fatal seizures or increased intracranial pressure. Death is slow, progressive, and inevitable. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of prehistoric disease isn't the dramatic, fast-killing infections. It's the slow, chronic diseases that would gradually destroy your body while keeping you alive to suffer. Malaria, for instance, transmitted by mosquitoes that are everywhere in tropical Africa. The parasite Plasmodium falciparum invades your red blood cells, reproducing inside them until the cells burst, releasing toxins into your bloodstream. You develop cyclical fevers that spike to 105 degrees, followed by violent chills that leave you shaking uncontrollably. Your red blood cell count plummets, causing severe anemia. Your spleen enlarges as it tries to filter out damaged blood cells. Your brain swells as infected blood cells stick to the walls of cerebral blood vessels. And Dr. Kevin Marsh from Oxford University studies severe malaria in Africa. His research reveals the brutal reality. Without treatment, cerebral malaria kills approximately 20% of victims. Those who survive often suffer permanent brain damage, seizure disorders, and cognitive impairment. And malaria isn't a one-time infection. You can get it repeatedly, with each episode weakening your body further. Your ancestors lived with chronic malaria for their entire lives, their bodies constantly battling a parasite that was slowly destroying them from within. But here's what makes your situation even more hopeless. You don't just lack immunity to these diseases, you lack the genetic adaptations that helped your ancestors survive them. Many African populations have evolved genetic mutations that provide partial protection against malaria. Sickle cell trait, for example, makes red blood cells less hospitable to malaria parasites. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency provides similar protection. These genetic adaptations came at a cost, and they can cause their own health problems, but they were worth it because malaria was such a powerful evolutionary pressure. You don't have these adaptations. Your genetic makeup is optimized for modern environments where malaria isn't a threat. Facing prehistoric malaria with a modern genome is like going into battle wearing a tuxedo instead of armor. Dr. Sarah Tishkoff from the University of Pennsylvania studies human genetic adaptation to infectious diseases. Her conclusion is sobering. Modern populations that haven't been exposed to endemic malaria for generations show dramatically higher mortality rates when infected. Their immune systems simply aren't calibrated for this level of parasitic assault. And malaria is just one example. Your ancestors evolved genetic resistance to dozens of different infectious diseases through brutal natural selection over hundreds of thousands of years. Populations that couldn't adapt went extinct. You're walking into a microbial battlefield carrying the genetic equivalent of a pop gun while facing enemies that required evolutionary artillery to survive. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of prehistoric disease is how it would interact with all your other survival challenges. You're already weakened by malnutrition, dehydration, exposure, and constant stress. Your immune system is compromised from the beginning. When you inevitably contract multiple infections simultaneously, and you will, your body simply won't have the resources to fight them all. Dr. Peter Hotez from Baylor College of Medicine studies what he calls polyparasitism, simultaneous infection with multiple parasites. His research in developing countries shows that people commonly harbor 5 to 10 different parasitic species at once. Polyparasitism creates a cascade of immune dysfunction, Dr. Hotez explains. Each parasite weakens the host's ability to fight other infections. The cumulative effect is devastating, leading to severe malnutrition, cognitive impairment, and dramatically increased mortality from normally survivable diseases. You wouldn't just have malaria or just intestinal parasites or just bacterial infections. You'd have all of them simultaneously, each one making the others worse, creating a downward spiral of immune collapse that would be impossible to stop without modern medical intervention. And here's the final crushing blow. Even if you somehow survived the immediate infectious diseases, the chronic inflammation and immune dysfunction would make you vulnerable to every other threat in your environment. Your weakened immune system couldn't fight off opportunistic infections. Your malnourished body couldn't heal from injuries. Your cognitively impaired brain couldn't make the split-second decisions necessary for survival. The microscopic killers wouldn't just threaten to kill you directly, they'd make it impossible for you to defend against any other threat. But there's one more factor that makes your situation truly hopeless, something that would seal your fate even if you somehow develop superhuman immunity to infectious disease. You're alone. In the prehistoric world, survival wasn't an individual challenge. It was a group effort, and without a tribe to protect you, teach you, and support you, even the strongest, smartest, healthiest human was doomed to failure. The social dimension of survival is about to become your final insurmountable obstacle. You're alone. And in the prehistoric world, that's a death sentence more certain than any predator, disease, or environmental threat you could face. Here's the brutal truth that Hollywood adventure movies never tell you. Humans didn't survive the Stone Age through individual heroics. We survived through cooperation, social organization, and collective knowledge that took generations to develop and required constant collaboration to maintain. You're not just missing tools, fire, and shelter. You're missing the most crucial survival technology humans ever developed, society itself. Let me start with a simple fact that destroys the entire lone survivor fantasy. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric humans lived in small, tightly knit groups of 20 to 30 individuals, not by choice, by necessity. Solo humans simply didn't survive long enough to leave archaeological traces. Dr. Sarah Hrdy from UC Davis, one of the world's leading experts on human social evolution, puts it bluntly, humans are obligate cooperators. We evolved as a species that cannot survive outside of social groups. Individual humans in isolation are less viable than most other mammals. We traded individual self-sufficiency for collective intelligence, and there's no going back. Think about what this means for your situation. Every single skill you need to survive, fire making, hunting, food processing, tool creation, shelter building, medicine, navigation, was developed, refined, and transmitted through social groups over thousands of generations. These weren't individual discoveries, they were collective achievements that required multiple people with different specializations working together, sharing knowledge, and building on each other's innovations. Your ancestors lived in what anthropologists call fission fusion societies, and small groups that would split apart and come back together based on resource availability and social needs. But even during fission periods, they maintained contact with other groups through complex networks of alliance, trade, and information sharing. Dr. Kim Hill from Arizona State University studied modern hunter-gatherer societies to understand prehistoric social organization. His findings reveal just how sophisticated these social systems were. Traditional foraging societies maintain active relationships with an average of 4 to 6 other groups within a territory of roughly 1,000 square kilometers. They share information about resource locations, weather patterns, predator movements, and potential threats through elaborate communication networks. You have none of this. You're not just lacking individual skills, you're missing the entire social infrastructure that made human survival possible. Let me walk you through what you're really missing when you're alone in the prehistoric world. First, specialized knowledge. In a group of 20 to 30 people, each individual could develop expertise in specific survival skills while relying on others for different specializations. Some became master trackers, others expert tool makers, still others specialists in plant identification or weather prediction. This division of labor wasn't just efficient, it was essential. The total amount of knowledge required for survival was too vast for any individual to master completely. Dr. Robert Boyd from UCLA studies cultural evolution in human societies. His research reveals the impossible learning challenge you're facing. The complete knowledge base of a traditional foraging society would take an individual human approximately 40 to 50 years to acquire, assuming they had expert teachers and dedicated full-time study. Most of this knowledge is learned through observation, imitation, and practice within social groups. You have none of those expert teachers. You have no social group to learn from. You're trying to reinvent 40,000 years of accumulated human knowledge in a matter of hours while simultaneously trying not to die. Second, cooperative labor. Even the simplest survival tasks were often group efforts. Hunting large animals required coordinated teamwork with multiple hunters playing different roles. Building substantial shelters needed several people working together to gather materials, construct frameworks, and provide covering. Food processing was frequently a communal activity where multiple people would work together to process large quantities of plants or meat, sharing both the labor and the resulting food. You're trying to do all of this alone, with no one to help carry materials, maintain fire while you're hunting, watch for predators while you're focused on detailed tasks, or share the enormous energy costs of survival activities. Third, information sharing. Your ancestors lived in an information-rich environment where knowledge flowed constantly between group members. Someone who discovered a new food source would share that information with the entire group. If one person spotted predator sign, everyone would benefit from that warning. Weather observations, seasonal timing information, navigation landmarks, tool-making innovations, all of this knowledge was continuously shared and updated within the social group. You have no information network. Every discovery you make dies with you. Every mistake you make alone, with no one to warn you or help you recover. Fourth, and perhaps most critically, protection and mutual aid. In a group setting, there was always someone awake while others slept, always someone watching for predators while others worked, always someone healthy to care for those who were sick or injured. Dr. Christopher Bohm from USC studied mutual aid systems in traditional societies. His findings show just how crucial this social safety net was. In traditional foraging societies, temporary incapacitation from injury or illness wasn't necessarily fatal because other group members would provide food, protection, and care. Solo individuals who became injured or sick had essentially zero survival probability. You have no safety net. The first time you get sick, injured, or even just exhausted, there's no one to help you. A sprained ankle that would be a minor inconvenience in a group setting becomes a death sentence when you're alone. But the social dimension of survival goes even deeper than practical cooperation. Your ancestors developed sophisticated cultural technologies for preserving and transmitting survival information across generations. Art, music, and storytelling weren't entertainment, they were survival tools. The famous cave paintings at Lascaux and Chauvet weren't just prehistoric Instagram posts. They were sophisticated information storage and transmission systems that encoded crucial survival knowledge in visual form. Dr. Genevieve von Petzinger from the University of Victoria studies prehistoric cave art and its role in information transmission. Her analysis reveals that these paintings served multiple survival functions. Cave art functioned as maps showing migration routes, seasonal camping locations, and resource availability. The animal depictions weren't just artistic, they were detailed behavioral studies showing hunting strategies, seasonal patterns, and anatomical knowledge essential for successful hunting. The geometric symbols found in caves across Europe represent what may be humanity's first writing system, a way to record and transmit survival information independent of individual memory. Music and storytelling served similar functions. Complex songs and narratives encoded information about navigation, plant identification, seasonal timing, and survival techniques in forms that could be accurately transmitted across generations without written language. Dr. Lynn Kelly from La Trobe University studies traditional knowledge preservation systems. Her research shows how crucial these cultural technologies were. Traditional societies use song, story, and ceremony to encode survival information in memorable, error-resistant formats. These weren't just cultural practices, they were information technologies that preserved knowledge with greater accuracy than written records. You have none of these cultural resources, no songs to remind you which plants are safe, no stories encoding navigation information, no ceremonies that preserve seasonal timing knowledge. You're starting from zero cultural knowledge in a situation where your ancestors had access to thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of prehistoric social organization was the development of trade and alliance networks that extended far beyond individual groups. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric humans engaged in long-distance trade spanning hundreds of miles, obsidian tools found far from their geological sources, seashells discovered hundreds of miles inland, and unique stone tool styles that spread across vast territories, all evidence of complex social networks that shared resources and information across enormous distances. Dr. Michael Petralia from the Max Planck Institute studies prehistoric trade networks. His findings revealed just how extensive these systems were. Middle Paleolithic trade networks spanned distances of up to 800 kilometers. These weren't simple exchanges, they were sophisticated relationships that involved obligations, alliances, and information sharing that could mean the difference between group survival and extinction. These networks provided crucial resilience against local resource failures. If one area experienced drought, disease, or predator pressure, allied groups could provide assistance, alternative resources, or even temporary refuge. You have no such networks. You are completely isolated from any form of external assistance or alternative resource access. The social infrastructure of survival also included sophisticated systems for conflict resolution, decision-making, and leadership that ensured group cohesion even under extreme stress. Dr. Richard Lee studied conflict resolution among the Kung people of the Kalahari, one of the last traditional hunter-gatherer societies. His research reveals how these social systems maintained group survival. Traditional societies developed elaborate mechanisms for managing conflicts, sharing resources fairly, and making collective decisions that maximized group survival probability. These social technologies were just as important as material technologies for long-term survival. Without these social systems, even small disagreements could lead to group dissolution and individual death. The social technologies that maintained group cohesion were literally survival tools. You have no group to maintain cohesion with, but you also lack the social skills that would allow you to integrate with a group if you somehow encountered one. Your ancestors were socialized from birth to function within cooperative survival groups. They understood the complex etiquette, reciprocal obligations, and collective decision-making processes that kept groups functional under stress. You're socially adapted for modern individualistic society. You lack the deep cultural knowledge and behavioral patterns that would make you a valuable group member in a prehistoric context. But here's what makes your social isolation truly hopeless. Even if you somehow survived long enough to encounter other humans, you'd be fundamentally incompatible with their social system. Your modern brain, with its individualistic conditioning and abstract thinking patterns, would be a liability in a context where survival depends on immediate instinctive cooperation and adherence to traditional knowledge systems. You wouldn't just be alone, you'd be fundamentally unemployable in the only social system that could keep you alive. The social dimension of survival reveals the final, inescapable truth about your Stone Age scenario. Humans didn't survive as individuals. We survived as a species through collective intelligence, cooperation, and cultural knowledge that took hundreds of thousands of years to develop. You're not just missing tools and skills, you're missing the evolutionary adaptations that made those tools and skills possible in the first place. Your modern brain, optimized for abstract thinking and individual problem solving, is about to face the ultimate test of adaptation, and it's going to fail in ways that will make every other survival challenge seem trivial by comparison. Your modern brain, optimized for abstract thinking and individual problem solving, is about to face the ultimate test of adaptation, and it's going to fail in ways that will make every other survival challenge seem trivial by comparison. Let me start with a question that might surprise you. Are you smarter than your Stone Age ancestors? The answer is both yes and catastrophically no. Yes, your brain is capable of incredible abstract reasoning, complex mathematical calculations, and sophisticated problem solving that would amaze your ancestors. You can understand quantum physics, program computers, and navigate legal systems of mind-bending complexity. But when it comes to the specific intelligence needed for survival in the natural world, you're not just less capable than your ancestors, you're functionally brain damaged. Dr. Daniel Lieberman from Harvard University studies human brain evolution and adaptation. His research reveals a sobering truth. Modern human brains have undergone what we call cognitive trade-offs. We've gained tremendous capacity for abstract reasoning while losing specialized cognitive abilities that were essential for survival in natural environments. Think about what this means. Your ancestors' brains were precision instruments calibrated for survival. They could process environmental information at superhuman levels, make life or death decisions in split seconds, and maintain awareness of dozens of variables simultaneously. Your brain is a generalist tool designed for modern environments. It's like bringing a smartphone to a sword fight. Technically more advanced, but completely wrong for the situation. Let me walk you through the specific ways your modern brain will sabotage your survival. First, navigation and spatial awareness. You rely on GPS to find your way around your own city. Your ancestors could navigate across hundreds of miles of unmarked wilderness using nothing but environmental cues. They read the landscape like you read street signs. The angle of shadows told them precise time and direction. Star positions gave them navigation coordinates accurate to within miles. Wind patterns, animal behavior, plant growth patterns, water flow, everything in the environment was part of a sophisticated navigation system. Dr. John Edward Huth from Harvard Physics Department studied traditional navigation techniques among Pacific Island cultures. His findings reveal capabilities that seem almost supernatural. Traditional navigators could determine their position within a few miles after sailing hundreds of miles across open ocean using only observations of wave patterns, star positions, and bird flight paths. Your ancestors had similar capabilities on land. They could track their position across vast territories, predict weather changes days in advance, and find specific locations they'd visited years earlier. You get lost in shopping malls. The difference isn't just knowledge, it's fundamental brain architecture. Your ancestors' brains developed specialized neural pathways for processing environmental information. They could detect subtle patterns in nature that are literally invisible to modern humans. Studies using brain imaging technology show that people raised in natural environments have dramatically different brain structure than those raised in urban settings. The hippocampus, responsible for spatial memory and navigation, is significantly larger and more active in people who navigate without GPS technology. Your hippocampus has essentially atrophied from disuse. You've outsourced spatial intelligence to technology, and your brain has reallocated that cognitive capacity to other functions. Second, pattern recognition and environmental awareness. Your ancestors could identify dozens of animal species from tracks alone, predict weather changes from cloud formations, and detect the presence of predators from subtle environmental cues. This wasn't just learned knowledge. It was enhanced pattern recognition capability that developed from constant practice in life or death situations. Dr. Louis Liebenberg studied the tracking abilities of Kalahari Bushmen and found cognitive capabilities that surpass modern scientific instruments. Master trackers can determine an animal's speed, health status, emotional state, and behavior from footprint analysis that would require laboratory equipment to match. Your pattern recognition skills are calibrated for artificial environments. You can spot brand logos from a distance, navigate complex user interfaces, and detect social cues in digital communication, but you can't tell the difference between animal tracks and random marks in the dirt. Third, sensory processing and awareness. Your ancestors lived in a world where survival depended on constant sensory vigilance. Their brains processed audio, visual, and tactile information at levels that would overwhelm modern humans. They could identify specific animal calls from miles away, detect approaching storms from changes in air pressure, and sense the presence of other humans from almost imperceptible environmental changes. Dr. John Young, who studies traditional awareness training, explains the difference. Traditional peoples maintained what we call wide-angle vision and deep listening, cognitive states that processed enormous amounts of environmental information simultaneously. Modern humans have lost these capabilities almost entirely. You live in a constant state of sensory tunnel vision. You focus on one thing at a time while remaining essentially unconscious of your broader environment. In a survival situation, this cognitive blindness would be fatal. Fourth, decision-making and risk assessment. Your ancestors made survival decisions based on immediate environmental feedback and intuitive risk assessment calibrated by thousands of generations of natural selection. When they saw potential danger, they acted instantly on instinct that had been honed by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Hesitation meant death, so their brains evolved to make lightning-fast decisions with incomplete information. Your brain is designed for deliberative decision-making in low-stakes environments. You analyze options, weigh pros and cons, seek additional information, and make carefully considered choices. This cognitive style is perfect for modern life, but disastrous for survival situations. While you're analyzing whether that sound in the bushes might be a predator, that predator is already eating you. Dr. Gary Klein studies decision-making under pressure and has found dramatic differences between traditional and modern cognitive styles. Traditional hunters and warriors develop what we call recognition-primed decision-making, the ability to instantly recognize patterns and take appropriate action without conscious analysis. Modern humans have largely lost this capability. Fifth, stress response and cognitive resilience. Your ancestors' brains were adapted to function under extreme stress. They could maintain clear thinking, precise motor control, and complex problem-solving even while facing immediate mortal danger. Their stress response systems were calibrated for physical threats that required immediate action. Stress hormones enhanced their performance rather than degrading it. Your stress response system is designed for modern psychological stressors, work deadlines, social conflicts, financial pressures. When faced with genuine physical danger, your modern stress response actually impairs your cognitive function. Dr. Amy Arnsten from Yale Medical School studies stress effects on cognitive function. Modern humans experience what we call cognitive hijacking under extreme stress. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex reasoning, essentially shuts down, but unlike our ancestors, we haven't maintained the instinctive response patterns that could compensate. When you're terrified, your modern brain becomes less capable, not more. You lose access to your higher reasoning abilities, but don't gain enhanced instinctive responses. Sixth, learning and skill acquisition. Your ancestors learned survival skills through constant practice from childhood, developing what neuroscientists call procedural memory, automatic unconscious competency that functioned even under extreme stress. They could make fire, identify edible plants, track animals, and craft tools without conscious thought, leaving their cognitive resources free for threat assessment and strategic planning. You learn through conscious, deliberative practice designed for abstract knowledge acquisition. Your learning style requires calm, controlled environments and conscious attention to detail. Dr. Anders Ericsson studied expert performance and found that traditional skill development created fundamentally different neural pathways. Traditional craftsmen and hunters developed automatic expertise that functioned independently of conscious attention. Modern learning typically creates conscious competency that degrades under stress. In a survival situation, when you're exhausted, terrified, and operating under extreme time pressure, you'd lose access to most of your learned skills just when you need them most. But perhaps the most devastating difference between your brain and your ancestors is something called cognitive flexibility versus environmental specialization. Your brain is incredibly flexible. You can adapt to new technologies, learn abstract concepts, and function in completely artificial environments that didn't exist when humans evolved. But this flexibility came at a cost. Your brain lacks the deep, specialized capabilities that made survival possible in natural environments. It's like the difference between a Swiss Army knife and a surgeon's scalpel. The Swiss Army knife can do many things adequately. The scalpel does one thing with perfect precision. Your ancestors' brains were cognitive scalpels designed for environmental survival. Your brain is a cognitive Swiss Army knife designed for artificial environments. Dr. Peter Gray from Boston College studies the evolutionary mismatch between modern brains and natural environments. Human cognition evolved in small groups living in natural environments with immediate feedback between actions and consequences. Modern humans live in artificial environments where this feedback loop is broken, leading to systematic cognitive maladaptation. You're not just missing survival skills, you're missing the cognitive architecture that made those skills possible. Your modern brain, with all its impressive capabilities, is fundamentally mismatched for the environment you'd be trying to survive in. Every aspect of your cognition, from perception to decision-making to learning, is optimized for a world that didn't exist 50,000 years ago. But here's what makes this cognitive mismatch truly tragic. The same evolutionary process that gave you this powerful, flexible brain also equipped you with something else, something that transcends individual survival skills and cognitive limitations. You carry within your DNA the legacy of every human who ever survived the prehistoric world, the genetic inheritance of millions of years of successful adaptation to impossible odds. The question isn't whether you could survive. We already know you couldn't. The question is why their success should inspire rather than discourage you, and what their legacy means for how you live your impossibly easy modern life. You carry within your DNA the legacy of every human who ever survived the prehistoric world, the genetic inheritance of millions of years of successful adaptation to impossible odds. The question isn't whether you could survive. We already know you couldn't. The question is why their success should inspire rather than discourage you, and what their legacy means for how you live your impossibly easy modern life. So why does this story matter? Why spend time imagining your inevitable failure in a world that no longer exists? Because every single person alive today is the descendant of the most successful survivors in the history of life on Earth. Think about what that means. Every one of your ancestors, going back 50,000 generations, survived long enough to reproduce, not just survived, thrived well enough to raise children who also survived and thrived. An unbroken chain of survival success stretching back millions of years through ice ages, volcanic winters, plague epidemics, droughts, floods, predator attacks, and challenges we can barely imagine. Dr. Spencer Wells, director of the National Geographic Genographic Project, puts this in perspective. Every human alive today represents an unbroken lineage of survival success that spans approximately 7 million years of human evolution. The probability of this happening by chance is essentially zero. We are the products of the most successful survival strategy in the history of complex life. You are not here by accident. You are here because your ancestors were the strongest, smartest, most adaptable, and most cooperative humans who ever lived. When 99% of other lineages went extinct, yours survived. When the Toba supervolcano nearly drove humanity extinct 74,000 years ago, reducing our species to perhaps as few as 10,000 individuals, your ancestors were among the survivors who rebuilt civilization from nearly nothing. When ice ages locked up the world's water and turned much of the planet into uninhabitable wasteland, your ancestors found ways to survive and spread into new territories. When new diseases emerged that killed entire populations, your ancestors developed immunity and lived to pass on their genetic resistance. You carry the genes of champions, the DNA of survivors, the genetic legacy of the most successful species that ever walked the earth. But here's what makes this legacy even more extraordinary. Your ancestors didn't just survive through individual toughness or lucky genetics. They survived through cooperation, innovation, and collective intelligence that represents the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement. They invented fire, language, art, music, medicine, agriculture, and civilization itself. They developed technologies and social systems that allowed humans to thrive in every environment on Earth, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests to desert wastelands. Dr. Melvin Connor from Emory University studies human evolutionary achievement. Humans are the only species that has successfully adapted to every terrestrial environment on the planet, not through biological specialization, but through cultural and technological innovation. This represents a fundamentally new form of evolution, cultural evolution that operates thousands of times faster than genetic evolution. Your ancestors didn't just survive the Stone Age. They conquered it so completely that they transformed the entire planet and created the modern world you live in today. You couldn't survive 24 hours in their world, but you don't need to. They already did the surviving for you. Every comfort you enjoy, every technology you use, every freedom you have exists because your ancestors spent millions of years solving the problems of survival so thoroughly that you never have to face them. The smartphone in your pocket represents millions of years of human innovation, starting with the first stone tools and progressing through every technological advancement your species ever made. The food in your refrigerator exists because your ancestors developed agriculture, domesticated animals, and created the global trade networks that bring resources from around the world to your local grocery store. The medicine that keeps you healthy builds on millions of years of accumulated knowledge about the human body, disease, and healing that began with your Stone Age ancestors experimenting with medicinal plants. The social systems that protect you, laws, governments, institutions, evolved from the same cooperative strategies that allowed your ancestors to survive in small hunter-gatherer groups. You are living in a world built by the greatest survivors who ever lived, and you are their ultimate achievement. But understanding this legacy isn't just about appreciating the past, it's about understanding what it means to be human in the present. You live in the most comfortable, safe, and opportunity-rich environment any human has ever experienced. You have access to more knowledge, resources, and possibilities than the greatest kings and queens of ancient civilizations could have imagined. Yet, many people today feel anxious, depressed, purposeless, and overwhelmed by challenges that your ancestors would have considered trivial. Why? Because we've lost perspective on what real challenges look like. Dr. Sebastian Junger, author of Tribe, studied the psychological effects of modern comfort. Modern humans often struggle with depression and anxiety, not despite their comfortable lives, but because of them. We evolved for challenge, cooperation, and meaningful struggle. Without these elements, we feel disconnected from our fundamental human nature. Your ancestors faced genuine life or death challenges every day, but they also experienced deep satisfaction from overcoming them. They lived in small, supportive communities where every person's contribution mattered for group survival. They had direct, immediate feedback between their actions and their well-being. You live in a world where real survival challenges have been eliminated, but where artificial challenges, social media comparison, career competition, financial stress, create anxiety without the satisfaction of meaningful achievement. Understanding your survival legacy can help restore perspective on what really matters. That deadline at work that's keeping you awake at night, your ancestors faced challenges where failure meant death, not just disappointment. That social conflict that feels overwhelming, your ancestors resolved life or death disputes in small groups where cooperation was essential for survival. That financial stress that seems insurmountable, your ancestors built civilization from nothing using only the resources they could gather with their own hands. This isn't meant to minimize your modern challenges. They are real and deserve attention, but understanding the scale of what your ancestors overcame can help you approach your problems with the same resilience, creativity, and determination that runs in your genetic code. You have within you the same problem-solving abilities, the same capacity for cooperation, and the same fundamental toughness that carried humanity through millions of years of impossible challenges. Dr. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, author of Anti-Fragile, explains how understanding our survival heritage can transform our approach to modern challenges. Humans are not fragile creatures that need protection from every difficulty. We are anti-fragile. We grow stronger through challenge and adversity. Our ancestors proved this. Every hardship they overcame made humanity more capable and resilient. But perhaps the most important lesson from your survival legacy is about gratitude and responsibility. You are living a life that millions of your ancestors died trying to achieve. They faced predators so you could live in safety. They endured starvation so you could have abundant food. They suffered from diseases so you could have modern medicine. They lived in constant danger so you could live in peace. Every breath you take, every meal you eat, every moment of safety and comfort you experience is a gift purchased with the struggles of countless generations who came before you. This creates both opportunity and responsibility. The opportunity is to live a life worthy of their sacrifice, to use the incredible advantages they've given you to create meaning, build relationships, pursue growth, and contribute to the continued advancement of human civilization. The responsibility is to remember that your comfort and safety are not guaranteed. They are achievements that must be maintained and protected for future generations. Your ancestors didn't struggle through millions of years of evolution just so you could waste your life on trivial pursuits or become paralyzed by artificial anxieties. They built this world so you could dream bigger dreams, solve harder problems, and push the boundaries of human achievement even further. You are not just the product of the greatest survival story ever told. You are its next chapter. The question is, what will you do with the incredible gift they've given you? How will you honor the legacy of the strongest, smartest, most determined humans who ever lived? How will you use your impossibly privileged position to create something worthy of their sacrifice? The Stone Age is over. The age of unlimited human potential has just begun, and it's your turn to write the next chapter of the greatest survival story ever told. So here we are at the end of your hypothetical Stone Age nightmare. Let's be honest about what we've discovered. You wouldn't survive 24 hours in the prehistoric world, not even close. But here's the crucial point I want you to understand. You wouldn't fail because you're weak, incompetent, or inferior. You'd fail because your ancestors were so incredibly, impossibly strong that they solved survival so completely you never had to develop those capabilities. They were so successful at conquering the natural world that they built you a reality where predators can't reach you, where food appears at the touch of a button, where fire comes from a switch on the wall, and where clean water flows whenever you turn a handle. You couldn't make it in their world because they made sure you'd never have to. Think about what this means for how you view your daily life. That traffic jam that's ruining your morning. Your ancestors walked hundreds of miles through territory filled with creatures that wanted to eat them. That work deadline that's stressing you out. Your ancestors faced life or death decisions every single day with no room for error. That relationship conflict that feels overwhelming. Your ancestors had to maintain perfect cooperation in groups of 20 people because a single social breakdown could mean death for everyone. That financial worry keeping you awake at night. Your ancestors built the entire concept of money, trade, and economic systems from nothing. I'm not saying your problems don't matter. They absolutely do. But understanding the scale of what your ancestors overcame can give you perspective on your own incredible capabilities. When you feel like you can't handle modern challenges, remember you carry the DNA of people who literally conquered the planet. You have within you the genetic legacy of the most successful survivors in the history of life on Earth. That anxiety you feel about uncertainty, your ancestors lived with genuine mortal uncertainty every moment of every day, and they not only survived, they thrived. That feeling of being overwhelmed by complexity, your ancestors solved problems so complex that modern science is still trying to understand how they did it. That sense that you're not strong enough for life's challenges, you are descended from people who were strong enough to survive ice ages, supervolcanic winters, and predators that could crush human skulls with their bare jaws. You are not weak. You are the product of the strongest lineage that ever existed. So here's my challenge to you. Stop underestimating yourself. Stop complaining about challenges that your ancestors would have considered luxurious problems to have. Stop feeling sorry for yourself when you live in the most comfortable, safe, and opportunity-rich environment any human has ever experienced. Instead, start honoring their legacy. Use the incredible advantages they've given you to push yourself beyond what you think is possible. Take on challenges that matter. Build something meaningful. Create relationships that last. Pursue growth that makes you worthy of their sacrifice. If you're feeling lost in modern life, if you're struggling with purpose or direction, if you're overwhelmed by artificial anxieties and manufactured problems, remember this. You carry within you the DNA of people who conquered the natural world, built civilization from nothing, and transformed an entire planet to create the reality you live in today. You are not descended from quitters. You are not the product of weaklings. You are the genetic legacy of the most determined, innovative, and successful species that ever lived. Their story is your story. Their strength is your strength. Their legacy is your birthright. The question isn't whether you're capable of handling whatever challenges you're facing. The question is whether you're willing to live up to the incredible potential they've given you. Your ancestors survived so you could thrive. Don't waste that gift. Thank you for joining me on this journey through deep time and impossible challenges. If this story changed how you think about your own life and capabilities, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed exploring the incredible story of human survival and wanted to discover more amazing chapters from our species' journey, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'll continue uncovering the extraordinary achievements that made modern life possible. Remember, you are the descendant of champions. Act like it. See you in the next.